Hello, and welcome to Spot Hidden. This is a show where we play Call of Cthulhu, and my name is London Carlisle, and I am usually the keeper of arcane lore. That's fancy words for Game Master. But tonight we have something very exciting in store. I'm going to be doing a solo adventure. So there's no keeper. Actually, I'm both keeper and player tonight as we take on a new release from Chaosium, which is called Alone Against the Tide. Does that sound crazy? Well, it's crazy good, right? It's basically like a choose your own adventure, fighting fantasy style, just mashed together with Call of Cthulhu. So, we gave Carly and Matt and Hudson the night off, and I will be the player here. So, I'm very excited to get started. I even have a pre-generated character that comes with this wonderful publication, and my character is Dr. Ellery Woods, professor of Miskatonic University. Now, that sounds fun. Let's go to the description so I can give you a little backstory on Dr. Woods here. So he's a heavily tanned man, dark hair, brown eyes, a short, neatly trimmed beard, wears a newsboy cap, and looks looks slightly at odds with his smartly tailored three-piece suit. Ideology and beliefs. Fortune favors the prepared mind. So he's very, very studious. He likes to keep himself in order. Significant people, his old friends of Boston. Oh, Ellery may have left his days of crime behind him when he got his education, but you never really leave a gang. Okay, so I see there's a mean streak under there. Meaningful locations: Boston, his hometown, but he now resides in Arkham at Miskatonic University. The research manuscript he's been working on for over a year now is his most treasured possession, and he hopes that it will win him academic acclaim. Gotta hit those C's there. Traits: inquisitive and ambitious. Okay, so it looks like I have quite the task here, embodying these things as Dr. Woods and also as the narrator. As I'll go through and I'll read and narrate this tale for you while making key choices at different junctions in the story that'll, decide the way that this goes. And I really hope that this doesn't last like 10 minutes long. Because that's very possible with Call of Cthulhu. As you know, it's a deadly game. So I got my handy dice here, my D100, and we are going to jump right into Call of Cthulhu, Alone Against the Tide. All right. We shall start at entry number 1. The sun sinks low on the horizon as you board the ferry headed across the lake to Esbury. As you set foot on the boat, the ferryman greets you with a wide smile and a cheery wave. He stands by the gangplank as you pass, welcoming the other passengers as he removes his cap to scratch at his balding head. His pudgy figure fills his well-worn suit. He looks a little awkward, but he seems a rather pleasant sort. Leaving that man behind you, you take a seat toward the prow, eyes fixed on your destination. Now it has like a little note here that tells me to go to entry number 12. So I click that and it's going to jump, directly to the next point in the PDF here. So it's very, very nice how Chaosium has worked that into this. Boom. All right. You settle into a seat with your thin briefcase resting on your lap, noticing that the first of the passengers are likewise getting comfortable for the short trip across the lake. Glancing around, you catch sight of the ferryman entering the cabin. As you sit patiently and wait for the engine to come to life, you listen to the sounds of idle chatter around you. You look out across the water and notice a thin fog beginning to form over the surface of the water as the temperature drops with the approach of night. Okay, so no spoilers here, don't know what's going to happen. That fog is trouble. Turn back now. Move. Run. Dr. Woods, don't do it. After a few minutes, you hear the engine sputter into action and feel the ferry lurch forward. The conversations around you continue as the ferryman joins you all on deck. You can't help overhearing most of the talk, though it is surprisingly banal. There are almost a dozen passengers on the ferry. Most of them are simply looking to spend their money during their weekend in Esbury and to enjoy the various shops and leisure activities the lakeside town has to offer. Many of the passengers seem to come for money, as is common in Esbury. You notice a strange look from one of the women in the group. She has a full figure and brown eyes and hair, but she seems to be looking you over, admiring your features. Now, in this part in the story, this is where you generate your character. But for time here, I'm going to use the pre-generated character Dr. Woods, and we're going to roll with him. So we're going to skip over this character creation stuff, but it leads you through very, very nicely. Thank you in the chat for the comment on the cut, Sam. Thank you. We're going to jump to entry number 80. The woman clearly sees something in you that she likes. Perhaps it is your look or a glint of intelligence in your eyes. She gives you a sly wink before turning back to her companions. You likewise turn your attention to the rest of the passengers. Sitting apart from the general crowd are two men in dark, well-tailored suits, whispering quietly to each other. They have unamused expressions on their faces, as if they don't seem to be pleased to be here. Perhaps their own business. Noticing that you're sitting alone, the ferryman approaches you and stands over you with that characteristic smile. You notice he's missing a tooth in the upper left corner of his mouth, but his eyes are bright as they light upon you. Good afternoon. You look a bit lonely there, friend. What brings you to Esbury? Okay. This is where you choose your occupation. Dr. Woods is a professor at Miskatonic University, which of course is Lovecraft's, bastion of education and learning, and also hiding lots of, mythos-y things. So I'm going to click that here. I'm a professor. Boom. I mentioned the passing of a distant colleague in Esbury, and how I've been sent by Miskatonic to recover his work and bring it back to the university. The man nods slowly. You mean Professor Harris? Real shame what happened to him. Always seemed like such a nice man. Officer Powell says they're still cleaning up the mess at the professor's place. But some of the more valuable bits will probably be at the estate sale tonight, if you're really wanting at it. The man looks down at his hands for a moment, and then back at you as he extends one your way. Anyway, I'm Lance Sanford. Pleased to meet you. But I wish it were under better circumstances. Okay? I have several options here. I can inquire about the professor. I can inquire about that officer. I can talk to the ferryman about himself. I can go to the estates or ask about the estate sale. Or I can just, brush him off and just wait to go to Esbury here. What do I want to do? What do you think? Let's see. I'm going to ask about the professor. I'm here on the university business. I'm going to check him out. Go to 27. The ferryman raises a questioning eyebrow at you. Professor Harris? I can't say much, really. I didn't know him all that well, but he seemed like a nice guy. I was so sad to hear that he died. Okay, now, I'm wondering. He said there was a mess. I'm wondering how this guy died. That's the question here. That's a big question. That might help me. You gently press for more information about his death. Sanford frowns, but answers. Officer Powell says it's suicide. I'm inclined to believe him, but Professor Harris seemed happy enough to me. More than content to relax in Esbury like anyone else. In between his studies, of course. Ancient Indian history, I think it was. I had coffee with the professor a few weeks ago, and he talked my ear off about it. Couldn't understand half of what he said, but he was quite excited by whatever it was. You exchange a few more pleasantries with Sanford before he goes off to finish guiding the boat into port. You pass the time in casual conversation with the other passengers and observing the scenery. You note the tall pines and the sloping hills along the lakeshore around Esbury. These features in the small town beyond are just visible through the growing mist. Watch out for the mist. Turn around. But squinting helps make them out to your satisfaction. In time, you arrive on the pier at Esbury, grateful to be off the water. And that was the end of this guy's story. This guy is doomed. I'm calling it right now because I've played this game too much to know that this has a happy ending. But I'm excited to figure out, what's in between that. All right. You take your first steps onto the pier with the rest of the ferry passengers, trying to get your land legs once again. The passengers still chat casually as they walk off to their destinations. You note one last little flirty wink from the full-figured woman as she struts along confidently behind the woman accompanying her. And you feel, oh, and you feel the two dark-suited men push past you at a brisk pace, nudging you out of their way. Sanford gives you one last wave and a smile as he begins tending to the old rust-stained boat that is his pride and joy. The last light of the sun is fading fast, and the fog is growing thick on the water now. The night is still young, but you would rather not be wandering around in the dark and the fog of a town you are unfamiliar with. Taking in your surroundings, you see a sizable crowd jockeying for entrance into a lavish, modern-looking building along the lakeside. A folding sign sits out front, illuminated by a lantern. The words, "Estate Sale Tonight," are written on it in large, bold letters. While this seems to be the main attraction, you could also seek out somewhere to stay for the night and set about your work in the morning. If you're not done so already, calculate your secondary attributes. Okay, we're all good on that front. So I have two options basically. I can go try to find somewhere to stay, or I can go to the estate sale. This is an easy choice. I'm going to the estate sale so I can see what kind of eldritch things they have there. All right. Pushing through the crowd, you make your way toward the estate sale. Judging by the number of people packing into the dance hall, this seems to be quite the event. Most of the people here are well dressed, with conspicuous amounts of jewelry and designer clothing on display. You see a broad-shouldered man in a policeman's uniform standing by the door. He has a scarred yet clean-shaven face and a baton at his side. His brow is furrowed in a serious expression as he watches the commotion through narrow eyes. It's probably the cop that, deemed this a suicide. As you mingle with the assorted academics and collectors, you notice a few other faces that stand out in the crowd. Most immediately, you spot a man in flowing orange robes with tawny skin. He seems more than a little out of place and is garnering some odd looks from the other guests. Glancing around further, you happen to notice the two dark-suited gentlemen from earlier, standing in a corner toward the front of the room, talking to a young, dark-haired man in a dated yet elegant long coat. He is of slight build and has rather sharp features. A thin wisp of a mustache hangs beneath his nose. Most noticeable, though, is the rather attractive young woman standing on stage at the front of the room next to a bespectacled old man. Long black hair cascades down her shoulders, accentuating her pale features and complementing her formal black dress. Occasionally, she and the older gentleman peek at objects hidden beneath white sheets. The sale items waiting to be displayed. I'm going to the stuff. I'm going to go see if she can give me a special price on any of these things. To make your way toward the stage and the woman, go to 22. You make your way to the stage, navigating around the many guests in the dance hall. Your eyes lock firmly on the woman, and hers rise to meet yours as she looks up from peeking at one of the hidden objects. She stops what she's doing as you approach, and a smile appears on her lips as she notices that she's caught your eye. She rests her left hand on her hip as you come to stand at the foot of the stage. The old man behind her continues his inspections, either unaware or uncaring that you've come to distract them. The woman leans towards you over the edge of the stage. You can see her makeup has been painstakingly applied, despite her status as a recent widow. You clear your throat as you meet her gaze and promptly introduce yourself. Dr. Woods. Wait, no, I can do better than that. Dr. Woods. Nice to meet you. Ooh, I like that. Ooh, I like that. I'm going to settle into this. This is Dr. Woods. I'm a doctor of stuff. She extends her hand to you formally. Well, aren't you new face in town? We get those quite a bit here. No doubt you plan to bid on some of my late husband's things. Good for both of us. Just be sure to give a good price for little old me, all right? She winks slyly at you. You realize now would be a good time to get some more information from this woman, who might be the most well-informed regarding my interests. She certainly seems like the flirty sort and would probably respond well to more of the same. So now we're going to do a charm roll. Here. Take the D100. I think Dr. Woods has a pretty low charm skill here, but let's try it anyway. Okay, yeah. So in Call of Cthulhu, it's a percentile system. You roll your D100. If it's lower than the skill you're checking, you succeed. If it's higher, you fail. I'm checking charm, which I have the base of 15 here. So I got to get under 15, which is pretty hard. But let's try it. Let's try it. This is me trying, as Taylor Swift says. Yes! I have a 1. I literally rolled a 1. 43. You take her hand in yours and bring it to your lips, keeping eye contact with her as you do so. She giggles, and her smile grows wider as she regards you with interest. My, aren't you the charm? If I weren't a widow, I'd be thrilled, but I still must mourn my husband, you understand. He was a stuffy old goat and obsessed with his studies, and I have no problem selling his things, mind you, but that's because I need the money. A girl like me gets used to a certain standard of living, after all. But I can't very well go chasing after the first suitor who comes to replace him, no matter how fetching. She winks at you again and rests her hand on your arm and lowers her voice to whisper. But perhaps you could join me for a drink later. I have a little bit set aside for good company. I won't tell if you don't. She seals the conversation with a final wink before lifting her hand and turning back to the stage and its hidden artifacts. Okay. Now we're in business here. Now we are in business. Okay, so I've begun gathering information here in Esbury. Would I like to interact some more? I can mingle with a crowd of guests. Okay, but I know that my colleague, he was into, I guess, the studies from Indian artifacts, I believe they said. So I might talk to the man in orange, but I also want to talk to the officer if I can. I'm gonna start with the officer. Go to 88. So I turn around and I backtrack towards the entrance to the ballroom. Something about the officer by the door catches your attention and holds it. He gives off a commanding presence, and his eyes bore into you intensely as you make your way over to him. As you move within earshot, he rests his hand on his baton and clears his throat. I really hope there isn't going to be any sort of problem, citizen. I wouldn't want to see anyone getting hurt tonight. His hand does not move from his baton. It's calling for a psychology roll. Okay, we can do that. Psychology. I have a 50 in psychology. A 50-50 shot of this. Oh, no. Okay. I dropped one of the dice. We're going to go with that. That was, I rolled an 8. I succeed. I'm glad I didn't pick that up and re-roll it. I was rewarded for good behavior. Right? Okay. I succeed. I'm going to go to 105. Good roll so far. It's probably not going to last long. I'm sure this is going to wear off at some point tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare for that. Okay, for an officer of the law, Officer Powell possesses a rather thuggish disposition. He seems to be looking for a fight, and from the scars on his face you can tell that he's been in many. With his size, he does cut a rather intimidating figure. Still, the use of thinly veiled threats as an introduction is somewhat unnerving, and certainly not proper behavior for a moral and ethical man. It's probably best not to provoke this man, as it would be wise to avoid him as much as possible. Can do. Back to 17. Now I'm going to talk to the guy in orange. Approaches the strange man. He seems well-traveled and weary, and his long orange robes are a stark contrast to the fine suits and dresses of the New England financial elite. He seems decidedly out of place. You open your mouth as if to speak and find him staring intensely at you. That's how I assume. That's just how I imagine in my head. Make an anthropology roll. All right, anthropology. I rolled 59. 59. That's probably a fail. I have a 60 in anthropology. 3 rolls, 3 successes. Let's get it. Go to 72. I recognize his man's style of dress to be that of a Buddhist monk. You bow a customary greeting, to which the monk smiles and returns the gesture before speaking in a heavily accented but fluent English. It's good to see one here with such respect for our customs. I am Banyu. His expression turns to a frown as he makes a sweeping gesture to the rest of the room. The rest here seem only to seek profit from my culture. Selling the items of my ancestors is most shameful. You respectfully question why you would come such a long way to witness such a thing. And he sighs before turning back to you. I've come with what money my temple could gather, so that I might save a certain few of the artifacts, ones that your Professor Harris stole from my temple in Sarnath. Sarnath? Okay. Yeah, some of you are like, yeah, what? Okay. When he came to visit some years ago, the monk seems troubled and falls silent. He bows a farewell, and you take the cue to leave. Okay, yeah, this is already this is going places. Okay, so we have the wife who is already looking for another man's. We have the monk from Sarnath. Sounds like he sounds doomed, if you know what I mean, or maybe I do. And then we have the thuggish police officer. Okay, I've done everything here. I want to commence this auction. Okay, mingle, done that. How do I do that? Oh, okay, once you're ready to move on, go to 35. Okay, can do. Okay, the murmuring of the crowd dies down, and people begin to gather around the stage as Amelia and the older gentleman call everyone to attention. The widow strides confidently to the front of the stage where the lights are centered. She flashes a broad smile at the crowd and begins to speak. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad all of you can make it tonight. As you all know, my husband recently passed, and, well, at this point, Amelia begins to tear up theatrically. So much that her makeup begins to smear. She produces a handkerchief to dry her eyes before continuing. Well, I'm very upset. I miss my poor, what's his name? William very much. And I don't know what I'll do without him. And that's why I've brought you all here tonight. I hope you can find some use for his collection. And I know that he would be happy to see his things go to those who value them highly. Hope you'll show this poor widow a kindness by finding something you like. But now, let us begin. I'll leave the auctioning to Mr. Warren. With her opening statement complete, Amelia moves to the stage left and allows the bespectacled old man, presumably Mr. Warren, to take center stage. He clears his throat before speaking. Tonight we have 6 very ancient and valuable items for sale from the estate of Professor William Harris. Though exceedingly strange, I have deemed these items to be authentic to the best of my ability. I have placed a ballot box, slips of paper, and a pencil on each of the 6 tables next to the items for sale. If you wish to bid on an item, simply write your name and the amount you are willing to pay for it on a slip, and then place it in the box. The item will be sold to the highest bidder, and all proceeds will go to the wife of the deceased. With that, Mr. Warren moves to reveal the gathered items. Mr. Warren approaches the first table and removes the cloth covering to reveal an odd pair of clay cylinders covered with strange etchings. They are small and seem quite fragile, with large cracks running down their sides. Mr. Warren proceeds to the next table and likewise uncovers the item in question. This one is significantly larger and more ornate, and appears to be some sort of altar or reliquary, heavily decorated with yellow-green gemstones. However, there's one similarity with the first item, the presence of the same strange written characters, though these ones seem to have been painted on. The old scholar turns to the next item in question and displays it for all to see, a decorated crown of solid bronze wrought with the image of a Hindu god. The next item is certainly the most mundane, a large, thick, leather-bound journal that appears to be well worn and beaten, with several loose papers jammed between the pages. Mr. Warren senses the confusion of some members of the crowd and clarifies that the notebook is the assembled personal works and studies of Professor Harris. I call dibs on that one. The item that follows the journal is a well-preserved ceremonial robe of a Brahmin priest. The cloth is pure white. The last item is perhaps the strangest of all. It is a small statuary idol, presumably of one of the many deities of ancient India, made from a blue-green stone in the shape of a rather grotesque lizard-like creature. The craftsmanship is crude and gaudy, so much that it appears fake. People begin moving among the items, looking them over and conversing quietly. Okay, make either an appraise or an archaeology roll. What is he better in? What's Dr. Woods better in? Appraise or archaeology? So, Dr. Woods has a 5 in appraise and a 70 in archaeology. So it looks like that 70 is going to be the move. 51. Success. I'm rolling so well tonight. Okay. 45. Okay. What? Okay, yes. You examine the items with a trained eye. The crown and the ceremonial robe are obviously authentic and typical of what I would expect. They are in great condition and would certainly fetch a good price, though they are no rarer than any other antiquity. Likewise, Professor Harris's journal seems like it would be of value to a scholar, though a few delicate cursory pages turns shows that it contains personal accounts and travelogues as well as historically relevant information. That is likely a good source of information on Professor Harris himself. However, the other items present are noticeably different. The altar and the clay cylinders bear a similar script and both show comparable signs of aging and wear. Given this, they are unlikely to be fabrications, but they are unlike more traditional finds from ancient India. A close inspection of the lizard idol leads you to believe that it is likewise verifiably authentic. Though the workmanship is strange and unnatural, and clearly nothing like anything you've seen from the ancient India or elsewhere, it doesn't bear any signs of work from modern tools or influence from modern styles either. Okay. Go to 81. You notice that you're not the only one looking over the items with such interest. The monk appears to be closely scrutinizing the stranger items as well, and the dark-suited gentleman from earlier seem to have taken a liking to the curious idol. Apart from this, the various other guests wander around the tables, occasionally fixing on one in particular. There are many guests and a fair number of bids being placed. If you like to bid on any of the items, now is the time. Okay. I'll be redirected to this entry after each choice, and I may bid on a number of items. Make each choice only once. Successful bid will lower my credit rating for future bids. I'm going to start off with the journal. I'm here on academic business. This is his collected works. I'm thinking that this would be useful. Just from an RP standpoint, just from the character being who he is and coming here for a reason. It seems to make sense. You feel that the information in the journal is essential to your interests, and you cannot help but make a bid. You place your paper with the others and hope that Mr. Warren calls your name when the amounts are compared. Okay, make an appraise or credit rating roll. Appraise again is 5. Credit rating of 60. Come on, let's get it. 26. 26, yes. I succeed. Okay. You feel that the knowledge in these pages could very well prove essential to you, so you offer a price that is more than fair. Sure enough, Mr. Warren calls your name and presses the leather-bound tome into your eager hands. Reduce my credit rating by 2 percentiles, and I'm also going to add that to my inventory. Okay, so now credit rating I'm at 58, and let's see, gear and possessions, journal. 81. I'm gonna place a bid. Everything else seems. I'm gonna place a bid on the idol, the strange idol. Something draws you to the curious idol, and you feel compelled to make a bid. You notice that you are not alone in this, as the monk and one of the dark-suited men both place bids of their own into the box. But you hope that yours is high enough. Okay. I gotta make a credit rating roll at extreme difficulty. So that's equal to or below 1/5 of that skill. So, as you know here, my thing is at 58. I gotta roll an 11 or below. Let's see. I kid you not. Success. Success. And yes, I'm using a Wonka candy top as a dice tray. I need help, y'all. I succeeded. 86. I have not failed one roll in this. Watch me face. Watch it be like a Shoggoth, just like chasing me down, and I just can't do anything about it. Dex roll, critical fail. Yeah. Clearly, none of the others expected anyone to pay such a ludicrous price for the crude idol. I still can't believe how much money you were offered for it, but the grotesque and misshapen thing is now yours. The monk and the men in dark suits stare daggers at you, but nobody else seems to mind or take much notice beyond a few raised eyebrows at anyone to pay such an excessive amount for such a trifling and outlandish thing. Still, when you look Amelia's way, you can tell she's quite pleased. Reduce my credit rating by 10. I'm now at 48, and then go to 81. I think I'm going to move on from here. I think I'm going to go to bed after this. Okay. If I don't want to bid on any further items, go to 16. Your business here is completed. You see the crowd staring covetously at the newly acquired items, and you spot Amelia looking smug and satisfied with a bag full of cash. Mr. Warren begins to clear away the tables while Officer Powell stands by the door and directs people out of the building and into the ever-thickening fog. Though some seem content to stay and socialize, you feel that it'd be best to go and bed down for the night. 26. While the estate sale seems interesting, you would feel more secure with a roof over your head for the night. You pull someone out of the crowd and inquire as to where you can find a room to rent. You were directed a few blocks into town to a modestly priced hotel a few buildings down from Esbury's police station. As you enter in from the cool night air, you're greeted by the heat of a roaring fire. The small front room feels stuffy and cramped. The bulk of the space is dominated by the large service counter, behind which sits a wiry-looking wisp of a woman. She turns her wide eyes to you and asks your name, then quotes you a price that's more than fair. With the transaction complete, you haul your thin briefcase up the stairs, unpack it, and settle into your room for the night. You wake up in the morning, grateful for the rest. You rise from your bed and take in the modest surroundings that make up your room. The furnishings are sparse. A small, poor-quality dresser and a cramped and dusty writing desk tucked in the corner. Sitting atop the desk is a plate of eggs and toast, apparently set out for you by the hotel's owner. The walls are plain and unadorned, save for a single window that faces toward the lake. However, this view is currently blocked by the incredibly thick fog, which is taken on a pale green hue. Your vision is obscured entirely, and you cannot see into the depths of that outlandish green mist. You also notice your personal belongings placed around the room, exactly as you left them the night before. Well, I would hope so. Hope no one's trifling through my things there. Okay. Alright, let me go back here. Okay. After getting dressed and eating a modest breakfast set out for me, you're ready to begin your day. You take a moment to consider what that means for you. Your mind turns to Professor Harris. If you're so inclined, you might be able to investigate the circumstances of his death further. Considering that you don't have his widow Amelia's address, you'd have to start your search with the official report filed with Officer Powell, a-hole, at the police station. Alternatively, you could take this free time to look through your belongings and examine any items you might have. The hotel owner has been in your room, so a check of your things might be in order. Or perhaps you have some other reason to look over your possessions. Or I can just leave Esbury. I'm just going to look at my things, make sure they're still there. Nothing is amiss. All my possessions are just as I left them. Okay, let me look at the journal. I want to look over the journal. Uh, this is a big entry. Though you glanced at the notebook during the estate sale, you haven't had time to properly look at it over till now. Reading through the book, you become deeply engrossed and spend the next few hours in study. The time spent yields valuable information. Okay, valuable information. Professor Harris made several trips to India starting about 12 years ago. During these visits, he went to multiple sites to make observations and recover artifacts. His longest and most profitable trip appears to have been 10 years ago during the excursion to Sarnath, India, where he writes about recovering several items from an active Buddhist shrine. Apparently, Professor Harris had some regrets about this theft, but he couldn't resist taking the artifacts for his personal collection. The descriptions of the items he came across in Sarnath matched some of the items at the estate sale last night. The clay cylinders, the gemstone encrusted altar, the lizard like idol are all described in detail in the entries related to the trip to Sarnath. These same items then appear throughout the rest of the journal. He clearly had been studying them over the past decade and developed something of a fixation with them. It was the idol that initially caught Harris's eye. According to him, the depiction of the great and grotesque water lizard matched no description of any known Hindu deity. Huh. Hoping to find clues to the idol's identity, Harris set about trying to translate the mysterious script and serial letters in the altar. Doing so, he met with significant difficulty, as the text was only barely recognizable as an archaic dialect of pre-Sanskrit language. The process was slow and painstaking until about a year ago. At that time, Professor Harris wrote of having strange and enlightening dreams. I wonder why. He reports waking in the ancient world from whence these items originated. A grand city of marble walls and onyx streets, of bronze gates and marvelous palaces and gardens. He writes of visiting the 17 tower temples of this ancient city and meeting the bearded gods who dwelled there, sat upon their ivory thrones. Harris called the strange place Sarnath, despite the sheer impossibility of this. He claims that among the temples he learned the secrets of the ancient writing. His next entry goes on to describe the autoclave cylinders as the brick cylinders of Kadatheron, though he hadn't yet identified the other objects. The next few pages have been torn from the journal. The entries resume with more mundane matters, though there are still references to artifacts from time to time. Most recent entries in the journal speak of Harris's daily studies and living with Amelia. It's clear that he cared about her deeply from the way he writes about her, but he laments that his studies keep him from spending the time with her that he would like. Instead, he lavished her with gifts and money, which she was all too happy to accept. He notes that Amelia had never been happier, despite the distance between them. The last entry to catch your eye is dated a little over a week ago. Apparently, the pages torn from his journal went missing only recently. Professor Harris expresses deep concern that there were no signs of forced entry into his study. Only he and Amelia had access to it, though he was sure he hadn't removed them from the journal himself. You finish your reading by glossing over the last week of the professor's life, which is rather uneventful, and peaceful beyond his continued obsession with the artifacts and his occasional worries about Amelia. A cursory inspection of the belongings. Is there anything else I want to look over? Let's look at the idol. Look over the idol. It's made of a sea green stone and chiseled in the likeness of a water lizard of some sort. Sculpture is grotesque and hideous. The very depiction of the lizard-like creature unnerves you. Still, the work is extremely well preserved and unquestionably ancient. You feel uncomfortable staring at the alien-looking thing for long. So, you stow it away under the bed and out of sight. Great. Let's go to the police station now. Step into the greenish mist. You feel it clinging tightly to you as you make your way to the short distance to the police station. Upon entering the small brick building, you are struck with a sense of claustrophobia. The walls here are uncomfortably close together and the space is tight. Crammed into the tiny structure are a large desk, several filing cabinets, and a few chairs. A closet-sized holding cell with iron bars sits at the rear of the room. Behind the large desk is Officer Powell, smoking a cigar with his feet propped up on the table. His coat is unbuttoned, and his hat lies on top of a stack of papers, next to a battered old revolver. He opens one eye and frowns at you, sighing through his cigar as he straightens himself up to look presentable. If you were bothering me right now, I'm going to assume this is important. You mentioned that you would like to see the police report for Professor William Harris's death, to which you replies with a snort. You have no business dealing with that. And even if you did, this is my jurisdiction. Shove off and leave me in peace. He didn't seem cooperative, but perhaps you could convince him. Do you have some special circumstance that warrants you looking through his files? Gotta make a fast talk roll for this. This is gonna be a fail. I'm gonna tell you right now. I have 5 in fast talk, so it's not looking good. Rolled a 67. I failed. We're not getting past this guy. So I try to convince the officer that, I have a particularly good reason for needing access to the file, but he just doesn't care. Scram, stranger, you're ruining my smoke. If you want to dig at the dead guy, go bother his widow. Place is over on the north side of town, right next to the church. Can't damn well miss it. Can't damn well miss it. Officer Powell will be of no more help at this time. So I'm going to go to the house. Page, entry 90. You walk into town, toward the Harris address. Even knowing the location is difficult for you to find your way due to your unfamiliarity with the town, and the density of the peculiar green mist. As a result, it's some time before you arrive at the Harris house. As you approach the building, a man steps out of the fog, blocking your path. He is young and thin, with rather angular features and the faint hint of a mustache atop his lip. He's dressed in a dark suit and stares at you from beneath a flat cap. You're an unwelcome surprise. I don't know what you're looking for, but you won't find it here. Your eyes betray you as you glance at the Harris house. The man scowls visibly. Why don't you leave the poor widow alone, you creep? If you want to bother her, you're going to have to go through old Joshua here, capiche? His hand brushes beneath his coat as if searching for something. But then he stops himself, pauses for a moment. He looking you over once more before spitting on the ground at your feet and turning away. I'm going to keep going to that house. Forget this guy. Despite his urgings, I feel compelled to speak to Amelia myself. Approach the front of the house and I note your surroundings. You know your surroundings. I keep switching between, reading modules and scenarios and stuff. You're constantly trying to switch things back and forth when you're delivering it to your players. So I'm still in that mindset now. So excuse me for the switch up. The house's exterior hints of the wealth of the occupants, but then again, so do most places in town. Directly across from the residence is a small church whose religious iconography seems to have inspired the Harrises in the design of their own house. A bronze cross hangs over the front door, and decorative columns line the outside walls of the two-story house. All in all, the architectural style is somewhat baroque, and complete with a pair of carved angels lounging beneath the eaves that are just visible through the strange haze. You knock on the door and wait in the mist for a few moments, hoping for someone to hear you. Eventually, much to your relief, the widow, Amelia, answers the door. She's wearing a bright red dress which accents her deep crimson lipstick. She appears to have taken great care over her appearance. She flashes you a smile and invites you inside. The house opens into a large foyer, and you see various crates and bundles stacked high along the walls. Just selling off a few of the more common things. Mind the mess, the porter hasn't come for it yet. She takes you by the hand to lead you past the stacks of items, helping you to pick your way through the deceased Professor Harris's assembled possessions. She takes you into a small drawing room full of antique furniture and offers you some coffee. After settling in and exchanging a few well-mannered pleasantries, you ask in more detail about the late Professor Harris. Amelia sighs theatrically and looks down at her hands. I can't imagine what you want to ask about William. I found him in his study with the gun still in his mouth. What more could you want to know? She said to make a psychology roll. Rolled a 58 out of 50. I'm gonna spend luck points here. I realize this is a crucial junction here, and it's a one shot. It's a one thing. I'm gonna spend 8 points of luck. to succeed. I don't know why I didn't realize it before. Selling all of his things, adopting such a flirty demeanor, dismissing questions about her husband's death. She didn't seem too broken up about her husband's passing. She's hiding something. You'd bet your career on it. You suspect she's involved in Professor Harris's death in some form or another. You open your mouth, prepared to call her bluff and press her for more information, but you're interrupted by a loud knock at the door. Amelia jumps up, startled, and stands there for a moment in confusion as the pounding door resumes. Amelia's face strains white as she goes to answer the knock. Your gut tells you something is wrong here. You feel uneasy about the officer at the door. You tell yourself you're being irrational on edge, but you have some trouble fighting that feeling. You have a few precious moments to react. I could wait, or I could make a stealth roll. My stealth is low. 20. I'm gonna wait. I'm just gonna sit here and wait. I went to 47. Before I read this, I just want to see what I would have rolled. I'm just gonna roll it just to see. I rolled a 2. I'm not going back. You hear a muffled exchange of words through the door, and within moments, Officer Powell emerges to the room with Amelia in tow. Powell's thick brow knits together in anger, and his voice contains a serious weight. His eyes bore into you. You glance down and notice his revolver drawn and aimed at you. You're under arrest for trespassing. You've no business being here. You're coming with me now. He didn't seem to be in a talking mood. It would be unwise to refuse, given the firearm aimed directly at you. Still, it might be better to take your chances now than to rot in a cell. I can fight this man. It says I can fight him. A hard brawl roll. Not gonna do that. It's 22. 22 or under. I'm gonna go with him. I decide it's probably best for me not to resist. I'm escorted out of the house at gunpoint into the sickly green fog. Amelia neither says nor does anything as you pass. She simply stares at you as you go. On the street, just outside the Harris property, you spot Joshua grinning madly. His eyes meet yours, and his smile gets just a bit wider. He put Officer Powell up to this. He's not even trying to hide it. That still doesn't explain why, but at least you know for certain that Joshua is not friendly to you, and that he has Powell in his pocket. You mull over this as you march through the misty streets and taken to the police station. You're ushered into the dim, dingy room and shoved into a closet-sized cell on the far wall. Officer Powell turns the key in the lock, sealing you in the cell. He settles into a seat and pays you no further mind as he begins puffing on a cigar. He seems to have no intention of letting you go any time soon. I can wait the night in the cell. I could attempt an escape. Or try to talk my way out with a fast talk roll. Just going over the sheet. There's something afoot. I feel like I can pick my way out, go back to my place, and head out. But I have a 50-50 shot of picking my way out of this. We're going to try that. 19! Let's go! These are great dice. 107. I spot a paperclip lying outside the bars of my cell. No doubt it fell off one of the stacks of documents on Officer Powell's desk. But I slip my hand between the bars and reach out to grab it, sighing with relief at my good fortune. I bend the paperclip to serve as an improvised lockpick. Glancing up, I see that Officer Powell is still turned away from you, puffing absent-mindedly on his cigar. You set to work trying to get the lock open. The lock is strong, as it's meant to keep criminals safely behind bars. But it is no match for your skills. It takes you some time to finally get it open, but eventually you feel it give way. You check on Officer Powell one more time. He seems to be paying you no attention, and if your luck holds, you may be able to sneak out of the prison without him noticing. Stealth roll. Oh, I'm terrible at stealth. I think it's like under 20, I think. Yeah, I think. 18! Success. Boom. I slip silently out of my cell and press low to the ground. He's reading over his documents, puffing away contentedly at his cigar. Doesn't notice me break out. After several tense minutes, I manage to inch my way towards the building's entrance. Crack the door open just enough to escape, closing it behind you as you exit. You now stand amid the dim, dank fog. You note the last of the sun's illuminating the mist above you. But your vision is largely obscured by both the haze and the growing darkness. Given my recent escape, it would not be wise to linger here. I could address the problem ahead first by returning to the Harris house to look for clues, or I might consider returning to the hotel to gather my thoughts. Or I can skip town. I'm not going to skip town. I'm going to go visit the hotel to gather my thoughts there, and, I still have my stuff there. Feeling its best course of action right now, I return to the hotel, turn the key, door swings open to reveal a startling scene. The room has been ransacked. The bed's overturned, covers are strewn about, the dresser drawers have all been pulled out and emptied. Briefcase lies open on the floor. Anything of value I had is gone. The window hangs open, letting the greenish mist into the room. You close it to keep out the chill and begin to set things straight while you overcome the shock of what's happened. As you consider your options, the sound of a loud and violent commotion drifts in from the room next door. Before I investigate this shuffle, we're going to take a short break here. Wow. Wonder what will come of this. Stay tuned. Thank you for joining me for Alone Against the Tide. All right. Greetings, the kid is back. All right, so let's jump back in. We're doing Alone Against the Tide. If you're just now joining us on Twitch or if you're just watching us on YouTube, this is the Call of Cthulhu solo adventure, one of them. There's also Alone Against the Flames, Alone Against the Dark. This is the newest offering, just came out, so we're going to jump back in where we last left off. I came into my room, and lots of my things were ransacked here. So there was a scuffle I heard kind of outside of the door, and we're going to go investigate that now. 142. Fearing that someone might be in danger, or perhaps that this is the commotion is somehow related to the theft from my room, I rush to investigate. You find the adjacent room's door open, and inside you discover a large and familiar-looking man in a dark suit. He looms over the prone body of a beaten, bloodied Buddhist monk. The man in the suit has clearly worked him over. The suited man has his back to you, and you doubt you've been noticed yet. With a little luck, you might be able to get the drop on him and subdue him quickly. Alternatively, if you've come into possession of a firearm during the stay in Isbury, you could also resort to a lethal force. I'm going to fight him. I don't have a gun. Wish I did. Pop, pop. But we're just going to do that. I dropped it again. 92. I rolled a 92. That's a failure. I take 1d3 damage. Let me get a D. Okay. Let's roll that. 3. I take 3 damage. Okay. Ugh. I'm now at 8. 8 health points. I take a step toward the man. He hears you approach and rounds on you, swinging wildly with a shout of surprise. His fist catches you in the chest and sends you sprawling backwards. He throws himself on top of you, landing blow after blow with his fists. You raise your arms to fend off the worst of his fury as he works you over. Amid the confusion, you glance up to see the monk running out of the room. Finally, the man in the suit grabs you by the collar and begins slamming you violently against the floor. Takes only a few such blows before you lose consciousness. You awake, stripped of any weapons, tied to a chair in a dusty basement. The first thing you notice is the pain from your wounds. They are still fresh and have not been tended to in any way. The second thing you notice is across the table from you is a strange collection of items. A pair of cracked clay cylinders, a gemstone-studded altar with curious scrawls, a stack of papers, and an unnatural-looking idol of sea green stone fashioned in the shape of a lizard-like creature. Standing next to the table is a man that you can't quite make out in the dimness of the room. He puffs absently at a cigar as he stares at you. Is this the cop? Behind the table is a still and other bootlegging equipment. You turn your head to see one of the suited men from before leaning against the door, sipping from a flask. When you begin to move, the unknown man walks over to you. He grins widely, and you spot a glint of madness in his eyes. As he hovers at the edge of the illuminated area, he produces a knife from his pocket. The blade catches the glimmer of a dim bulb flickering above. The stranger shoots a glance at the suited man by the door, who nods and leaves. The remaining man comes to the light and presses the knife against your cheek. It digs into your flesh, nicking you and drawing a drop of blood on the tip. Who is this? Thought you could cause trouble for Josh, eh? I'm going to enjoy this. Getting rid of my little problem. Everything was fine until you started snooping around. You're putting me and Amelia both in danger here. You're only getting in the way of my plans. So, I'm going to enjoy tearing open your throat and offering up your life to the idol. Perhaps it'll please him, and then I'll get what I want. I'll make my way to that beautiful place that I've seen in my dreams. It'll be over soon. But I will bleed you slow, because I want to enjoy this. He takes the knife and presses it in deeper. You struggle reflexively against your bonds, trying to escape the pain. Perhaps, if you struggle hard enough, you can break free. Make a strength roll. $74? That's a failure. My strength is 50. That's a fail. Joshua removes the blade from your face and walks across the room. Oh, that was Joshua. Oh, oops. I gave him a different voice then. Excuse me. I did like that settled in, Joshua. He lifts the hideous idol from its spot amid the dusty relics and places it on the floor in front of you. As you struggle in vain against the thick ropes that bind you, you glance at the grotesque statue and then fix your gaze on Joshua as you squirm and twist beneath the ropes. Joshua locks eyes with you, smiling with wicked glee as he rests the cold metal slightly against your throat. Then his eyes glaze over as he begins speaking in a strange tongue. Grabbing yak, yak, he speaks each syllable in a slow, monotonous tone, as if he's focusing very carefully on the sound of the words. Grabbing yak. As the last syllable passes his lips, Joshua takes a knife and presses it sharply against your neck. With a single smooth motion, he slits your throat. As you bleed out, your eyes perceive impossible visions. The world before you melts away, replaced by a shining city of marble, onyx, and lustrous gems. You see this magnificent city in all its splendor, sitting next to a placid lake. And then, in an instant, it's gone, as the water rises up to swallow it. The lizard thing of the idol, given life and power by your blood, surges up from the water. The being eyes you with malicious sentience, as the waters swell and consume you. The end. You have been offered up as a sacrifice to one of the great old ones. Your visit to Esbury is over. All right. Awesome. That was my playthrough of Alone Against the Tide. Yeah, so please head over to Chaosium, our wonderful sponsors here, but more than that, just producers of great material such as this, to play through this yourself, to get a different outcome than I did, to hopefully survive this, to combat this thing somehow. But that was an awesome ending for me. Big fan of, the Dreamlands and the Doom that came to Sarnath. The current arc we're doing on the Spot Hidden, campaign right now. We're in the midst of the Doom that came to Wessex, so I'm a big fan of all of that lore there. This was fantastic. Can't wait to play this again myself, see what else I get. But please, if you enjoyed this, head on over to the Chaosium store and pick this up. Pick up the PDF. It's very easy to kind of click through and have some fun. Do your own reading of it. And yeah, maybe this will even give you some inspiration for a campaign that you want to run. But it's a great time, and thank you so much for sitting down and allowing me to read you a little bedtime story. But that's it. I'm London Carlisle. Please stay tuned for Spot Hidden for all of our great things that we have coming up. We have some fantastic one-shots planned, and of course the ongoing Cthulhu Dark Ages saga, which will venture into some uncharted territory that you might enjoy or be familiar with if you've been paying attention. And that's it. That's it for tonight. All right. Have a good one.